I call this meeting of Sylvania City Council for September 20th, 2021 to order. I welcome all of you to our meeting this evening. I assume many of you are here for the talk about proposed Ordinance 64, 2020, about the cell tower, granting the special use permit on the Sylvania Northview High School property. That's proposed Ordinance 64, 2021. We do have a few things to go through before we get there, but I assure you it is early on the agenda. With that, I call on the clerk to call the roll.
Here.
Here. Here. Here.
Here.
Mrs. Westfall is excused. 6 members of City Council are present, therefore a quorum does exist. Again, I welcome all of our visitors to this evening's meeting. During the meeting, if you'd like to speak, please raise your hand so that I can see you, and I'll try to recognize you at the appropriate time. At this time, I invite you to join us for our Pledge of Allegiance, this meeting led by Ms. Thau.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Additions to the agenda. I have none for this evening's meeting. Mr. Fry?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to try to schedule a Finance Committee meeting.
Let's make that 13A. Other members of City Council, any items to add? Hearing none. Mr. Sanford? We'll put that on 15, Chamber event announcement. Mr. Schroyer? Chief Snore? Mr. Aller? Mrs. Brining? Is there a motion to amend and approve the agenda for this evening's meeting?
So moved. Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the amended agenda for this evening's meeting. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries and our agenda for this evening's meeting is set. Agenda item 4 is approval of the meeting minutes from our previous meeting on September the 7th. Mr. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move approval of the minutes from the council meeting of September 7th, 2021 as submitted.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for approval of the meeting minutes for September 7th, 2021 as submitted. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries and those meeting minutes are approved. We have a special presentation tonight, and we're thrilled to have 2 very well-known and experienced Ohio athletic officials with us this evening. Service sports. Come forward, Dave track and field, Andy Babula for girls cross country. And a proclamation for each of them, but I'm only going to read it once, so come on up, guys. I'm going to stand together, and I'll read it towards you. It is a proclamation from the office of the mayor. Whereas Andy Babula and David Fees have been selected to receive the 2019-2020 Active Officials of the Year Award from the Ohio High School Athletic Association for their service as track officials. And whereas OHSAA's mission statement is to serve our member schools and enrich interscholastic opportunities for students, and whereas nominees must exemplify high standards of ethical conduct, moral character, officiating professionalism, and carry the endorsement of their respective state high school association, as well as being made recent significant contributions to high school officiating in Ohio. And whereas for the 2019-2020 school year, Andy was the active official of the year for girls cross country, and Dave was the active official of the year for girls track and field. Now therefore I, Craig A. Style Mayor, do hereby proclaim today, September 20th, 2021, as Andy Babula and David Speece Day in the city of Sylvania. Congratulations. Andy, well done, both of you. We are honored to have two officiators recognized from the city of Sylvania. It's great. Thank you very much. You are both welcome to stay for the entire meeting, but there is no obligation to do so. If you want to get a taste of it, we're going to get right into it with the big issue tonight. We are now ready to move on to Agenda Item 6, which is Proposed Ordinance 64, 2021, granting a special use permit to allow the placement of a 130-foot wireless communication facility with a 10-foot lightning rod for a total height of 140 feet behind the Sylvania High School property at 5403 Silica Drive. Mr. Hanum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to move adoption of ordinance number 64-2021. All members of council having received copies, I'll read by title only. Granting a special use permit to allow the placement of a 130-foot wireless communication facility with a 10-foot lightning rod for a total height of 140 feet behind the Sylvania Northview High School property at 5403 Silica Drive, Sylvania, Ohio, on the application of Stephen E. Carr, agent for Selco Partnership, DBA, Verizon Wireless, and Tarpon Towers 2, LLC, on the recommendation of the Municipal Planning Commission and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Mayor, for the
Mr. Fry.
for the purposes of further discussion and clarification, I'm willing to second. I know we typically do the discussion in advance here at council, but for the purposes of this, I would be open to kind of reversing that order if you're okay with it.
I am. So we'll accept your second and open for discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess one of the things that I would like to know or get clarified for the general public and for members of council is, as this was presented with a recommendation from the Municipal Planning Commission, Mrs. Brining, what are our alternatives at this point now that we have a motion and a second? So if there are not, I understand the first two, if there's not 5 no votes, then what happens? It goes to a second reading next meeting? Or until there were 5 votes either way?
Well, if it is, the motion is to approve it, it'll take 5 votes to do it tonight, or 3 meetings with 4 votes to do it. To turn it down, if the motion fails for passage, I think there'll be a second motion to deny it. And then I think you'd probably take a second vote on that. Are you in agreement with that, Mr. Hanum?
That wasn't my plan.
You want to do it with the one vote? Well, if you are,
We don't
5
pass it, we don't pass it.
if you don't pass it, but you need 5 votes to deny it and overturn the Plan Commission. If there are 4 or less votes, it is in effect in limbo. You have taken no action because 5 votes are necessary to overturn the plan commission.
Let's see what the votes are.
All right. And I think council should also hear, Mrs. Brining, what you would expect to happen in the different possibilities. First being it passes, obviously they proceed with the work. Second, if it is denied, what will happen?
Well, action. Likelihood of,
So that's four no votes is no action. Okay. If there are 5 no votes, what happens?
5 no votes, then I would expect, though I haven't about this, also file in a
That answer your question, Mr. Fry?
It does.
Further questions from members of City Council? You're prepared to proceed with your vote?
And Mr. Mayor, I would just note that during our last zoning and annexation committee meeting, I went through an extensive list of concerns I had regarding the fact that this special use application did not meet the criteria in our municipal code, section 1153.05. I'm not going to redo that here, but that will explain my vote on this matter. So I think we're ready to proceed.
I'm ready to proceed, Mr. Mayor, as well.
All right. It has been moved and seconded for passage of Ordinance 64, 2021 as an emergency measure. All in favor say aye. Opposed?
No.
The motion fails, and I believe the vote is 6 against. So Ordinance 64, 2021 fails and is not enacted as an emergency measure. I think that ends the business for that this evening. Okay. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 7, Mr. Sanford would like to give an Economic Development Director's report on planning services to study the feasibility of creating a TIF or Tax Incremental Financial District in downtown Sylvania. Mr. Sanford.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In your packet, as the mayor mentioned, is a proposal for us to work with Reveille. Heard from Glenn Frisdale at our last meeting. I'm impressed with his knowledge about the topic, and I want to make sure that we get this correct. And that's what this proposal is for, not to exceed $6,500. He will have his information and recommendation to us within 3 weeks. I will communicate that to the council as soon as I receive it. He will also, if this is approved, setting up a meeting where he and I will meet with Lucas County Auditor, so we engage with her going forward with the values of these properties. And the information that Laura Bigelow shared in our office of all the addresses that I passed out. There were some updates to that we're doing and working with Glenn already on. Any questions?
Mr. Sanford, one question in regards to the conversation about the not to exceed 6,500. So is this a lump sum, 6,500, or is he billing hourly, or how does this logistically work?
Would be billing hourly, and he did not expect it to go to that amount, but it would be not to exceed. So depends on who on their staff works on it. They have different billing rates and so on, but we'll have that full explanation on that too.
Is there a written proposal on this, or is this just,
Yes,
okay, that was not in our packet.
I can send that all,
Okay. I, for one, would like to, I am burdened with 41 years of law practice. I would prefer to read the proposal in advance of voting on this. Do we need to do this tonight? Could we wait 2 weeks, or?
Well, the answer to that is dependent upon the direction that we take.
Well, I assume we're not gonna do this in the next 2 weeks, right?
No, but we are trying to do it by the end of the year.
Are,
We would like,
that what he's talking about still?
yes, that he can still meet that end of the year. I think if
Is that what he's gonna recommend?
he could, that's a very strong, did indicate he'd be able to meet the deadline that we talked about, the timeline that we had together. I have the copy of it with me. I
Okay.
can give it to you, and
if you have it, we can copy it and distribute it right now.
I do have it. Here's some, want me to make copies and distribute, and then we can,
Why don't we just postpone this item a little further
Let's
down
get
on the
the
agenda?
copies made and we'll come back to it in the agenda. That's satisfactory.
Thank you.
The law director has it and can email to everybody right now. Would that be satisfactory?
Depends whether she's sending it by personal or the, or whether she's sending it
It's
to
either way,
the,
whatever's
to the
easier.
City of Sylvania email there.
Why don't we make the copies? Well,
All right.
let's just defer for a little bit, maybe.
We will return to this item towards the end of the agenda. Let's move on to agenda item 8, which is proposed resolution 10, 2021, a resolution accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county auditor. This is annual legislation. The clerk prepares this, I believe, in conjunction with the finance director. Mr. Schroyer, any comments about this?
Mr. Schreier, with the anticipated changes in the amounts that people's homes are worth, did that reflect in these numbers, or is that not set yet, so therefore it's not reflected? Right. Right. Okay, thank you.
Other questions for the finance director?
Yeah, I just noticed that this document has, does this require a roll call by statute? It does, okay. All right, thank you. This also says dispensing with the second and third readings, so I think it's probably,
We will not need to do
they
that.
haven't read our charter.
All right.
So, just for clarification purposes, Mr. Mayor, then, and Mrs. Bryan, is this now modified?
This is Speaker Wilk.
I understand. But if we're eliminating second and third readings from this document, am I modifying the resolution, or are we considering the resolution as submitted? I'm fine with that. I just, that's why I'm looking at you.
It's, they,
I understand. I just want to make sure we're staying in bounds.
We just want to get our money.
yes.
Thank you. I agree. I concur, Mr. Hayner. Okay.
Fry, you may introduce by title only.
Yes. I'd like to introduce Resolution Number 10, 2021, by reading by title only. And resolution accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county auditor. I move adoption of Resolution Number 10, 2021 as an emergency measure.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded for passage of Resolution Number 10, 2021 as an emergency measure. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes.
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 Vote is 6-0. The motion carries, and Resolution Number 10, 2021 is enacted as an emergency measure. Thank you. Moving on to Agenda Item 9. This is Proposed Ordinance 66, 2021, amending Section 139.02 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Sylvania, 1979, is amended by adding a title and hourly rate for part-time custodians. Mr. Aller, you propose to talk about this? Or would you like the chief or Toby to talk about it? All right.
We're trying to gain greater control over the access, especially the department, tax department. Currently have a cleaning agency that comes in and does it, and what we're proposing is to hire two part-time individuals.
An important point that we covered in the mayor's staff meeting was this will not cost the city additional funds because we won't be paying an employment agency.
It's actually a small savings. That's
There were some
For
sensitive materials
documentation.
on a detective's desk that were viewed, my understanding.
So this is just creating the position. They have not determined we're going to hire for that, although we have a couple of good.
And as Mr. Schreier put in his email, these two part-time employees will not receive health care or other benefits.
Mayor?
Mr. Fry.
With everything that I've read about the pressure to secure employees in this section of the economic working strata, are you comfortable that $15 an hour, I mean, is sufficient?
In both Kevin and I, and the multiple conversations,
It works
And
for
the-
them, it works for me.
And how does this change prevent the event that triggered this?
I don't think you could ever, it's not, it won't prevent it from happening, but I think you have more control. Employee, it's an actual same person doing it. When we had a problem, it was actually a substitute for the person that was normally doing it, agency, so kind of at the mercy of them, who they send. We can do better background checks. Hires. Completely.
I think we could do some of that by contract with our service that we were obtaining too, that we would clearance. I'm concerned that, I don't know, who else do we pay in the city, I guess we, the
There's no full-time.
filing clerks get no benefits?
This would be, there's no full-timers. A lot of,
Right. Right. Well, you know, it's, I'll defer to judgment on how to get this done, but
Chief Snow, would you like to make a comment?
yeah.
Compared to the proposed wages, incident that we did have, not only did during that time period, we were probably having 3 or 4 different contract workers coming in a month. Well, to staff those, especially in this economy, we're very fortunate. The gentleman who's doing it right now has been doing it for a year. Background in security, also in the business world. He's kind of retired. Only a 5-hour a night job, 5-hour per week. I know when I started here, for the first 20 years I worked here, we had Pops and Susie. They were a married couple. They were retired. They cleaned the building for 20 years. They retired. Since then, we've had a hard time placing them. They were contract employees through a company, very reliable. Have a reliable person right now. That's kind of the background story played out. Catalyst for it was the security.
We do have Ordinance 66, 2021 to establish these part-time rate per hour for part-time custodians. No further questions for Richardson.
Mayor, I'd like to, by title old, amending section 9, Codified Ordinance 9 and 99 as a title on hourly part. I will passage as a
Second.
Been moved and seconded for passage of Ordinance 66, 2021 as an emergency measure. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries and Ordinance 66, 2021 is enacted as an emergency measure. Thank you. Mr. Stanford has distributed the proposal from Reveille. With your permission, Mr. Hanem and Mr. Fry, we'd like to go back to that issue now. So we're going to go back up on the agenda to agenda item 7. Why don't you go through the proposal that you distributed, Mr. Sanford?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you can see that Glenn submitted the proposal, and they would assist the city in pursuing the feasibility of creating a tax increment district as recommended in your recently adopted downtown master plan. It utilizes much relevant information provided by your office and staff to minimize the project cost. Please feel free to contact me. Anything. And then he breaks down work that they're going to do in regards to the TIF district. Gave him the, besides the addresses, the maps that we were talking about. This goes over the terms and the rates. I was telling you about the 4 different staff members that could be working on it and their different hourly rates.
Provided on a time and material basis not to exceed $6,500.
Correct.
So Bill, I have a question. So does this include
Project talked about. Keller has provided what we talked about downtown. project. If, and that's something too that.
Yep.
But you don't have to have that project established. Probably have that discussion.
I think we have a chicken or the egg question in regards to the TIF. Gentleman, a couple of weeks ago, indicated that should identify the costs of the project or projects and the cost of it, and kind of figure out whether the revenue will support it. My tendency is to go the opposite way. Let's figure out what the TIF is, let's figure out or estimate what the revenue potential is, then figure out what we want to include or not include. I know that downtown streetscape may involve addition or elimination of parking. There's all sorts of other, indications of things. There's lots of conversation attached to that, which would take a significant amount of time to sort through.
Yes. I think we're gonna get, but again, what Dan Pryor's referring to, I think the very first step is identifying what the TIF, that will also determine what type of a project. If, let's say, a TIF over the 10 years generates $3 million, put out or identify a project that's a $10 million.
Sure you could. It's just a matter of whether we take the rest of it out of the rest of our funds. That may not be in the city's best interest, but we could do it.
Or
Yes,
choose,
I just, if you were
or
trying to.
choose to do a TIF that's longer than 10 years.
Right. Or bond it.
We need to work both numbers at the same time to see where we can go.
Yep.
I have a question, are we confident that this $6,500 will cover the planning and?
That's what he proposed.
It's the financial planning. He's not
Yeah,
going to be
I
looking
understand.
at the project.
Yes, I understand that.
This is what it would cost not to exceed to deliver what we're asking for as to amount, length of,
TIF.
that's key, whether it's that 10-year, could be 20, 25 years.
He feels confident that he's going to be able to do that.
Yes, and then also, at this point, still confident that it could meet that early deadline if that's what we want to do.
That was my
If
next
that's-
question. Okay.
That is definitely, our conversations, he could still meet that deadline.
All right.
That's what we so decide to do.
Okay, well, I just want to note that I think I share Mr. Fry's thinking on this, and that we had a different sense. We were more interested in establishing a TIF as a revenue source for the city, not for any specific pre-identified project. See over time what would be available to us. So we need to make sure that
I think
Glenn understands that we're thinking about this apparently differently than he was.
I can share that.
I got that right?
That's my way of looking at it.
I mean, if we can establish a TIF that over a 25-year period would bring us, X amount of dollars, then rather shoehorn in or plan how we would spend that, rather than starting with a preconceived idea of what we wanted to do, trying to target the TIF to raise that money. That's a really different thing. So, got that right?
Yeah, to me, the activity that we see in the downtown footprint is so significant that it's really hard to project the crystal ball out of what the potential opportunity may be for if come back for projects that we would reinvest back in the city footprint.
For example, I'll go back to the downtown plan. Okay, one of the things that was vision part of the downtown plan was, a downtown parking garage. Okay? I don't want to sit here and plan a downtown parking garage today and target a TIF to raise enough money to fund the parking garage. But That's an option that we're gonna look at in the future, and so we wanna maximize our TIF revenue to assist us in that kind of a project if we decided to pursue it. That makes sense? So we're not, so really interested in trying to, I am interested in having a TIF that maximizes the benefit city under whatever rules are applicable, as opposed to trying to do a specific project.
Just to clarify, question, the one project we have talked about was the streetscape, but Glenn made that clear, we do not have to have the project identified.
Yeah, okay.
So we'll put all that in with, I'll convey that to him, part of his report.
Again, I don't want to repeat.
Sorry.
Any further questions for Mr. Sanford before we consider ordinance 65, 2021? Mr. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to introduce ordinance number 65, 2021 by reading by title only. Accepting the proposal of Reveille to provide economic development planning services to study the feasibility of creating a tax increment financing district, appropriating funds therefore in the amount of not to exceed $6,500. I move adoption of ordinance 65, 2021 as an emergency measure.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for passage of ordinance 65, 2021 as an emergency measure. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries and ordinance 65, 2021 is enacted as an emergency measure. Thank you, and we'll get the ball rolling on this. We will go back to the agenda. We are now up to agenda item 10. This is proposed resolution 11, 2021, affirming the 5 I's of disability justice. This was brought to us, both the President of Council's and my attention. Mr. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A constituent, a citizen of the city of Sylvania is on the Disability Rights Commission for the county and also on the board of DD. And I've known him for many years. He brought this to my attention, and I reached out to the mayor, and the mayor had already heard about this, but the city of Toledo has passed a resolution similar to this that would may allow us or get us to consider, as we're going through our public policy considerations, that we consider disability justice as part of the dynamic. I don't see this as a rush. I think we can move this to a committee to make sure. I know I'm perfectly comfortable with that. I can't speak for other members of council, obviously, or any of you in that regard. But I also expect that we're probably doing the vast majority, if not all of these today. But I just want to take a little more time, since this was introduced to me last week, that we make sure that there's no conflict or issues associated with any part of the city's structure with this particular circumstance. So that's why I would recommend to, as other members of council, that we move this to committee. I was thinking about moving Mr. Richardson's relations.
Can we get a copy someplace of
Sure,
the
I'd be happy to
5 I's of,
forward that on to all members of council. It's, but in that regard, is that something I need to make a motion on to move this? Okay. I'll make a motion to, for resolution number 11, 2021 be referred to the Employment and Community Relations Committee.
second.
Moved and seconded to refer resolution 11, 2021 to the Employee and Community Relations Committee. All in favor of that indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passage, motion passes. Would you like to try and establish a committee meeting now, or review it and then set a meeting perhaps at the next?
Yeah, we can.
as you're starting to look at that, I fully agree with Mr. Fry. The resolution doesn't really tell you what the 5 Is are. There are many of them that we are required to do by federal law, but there are some others that I think you need to read and be sure of.
Again, burden.
That's
Devil's in the
concerns
details.
About liabilities. So,
Yep.
So it's,
There's a Streets Committee meeting at 6:45 to consider the Cushman Road speed humps. Yes, make a motion to set that meeting.
I move that relation.
Second.
Moved and seconded to set a Employee and Community Relations Committee meeting for Monday, October the 4th at 6 PM in these council chambers for the consideration of Resolution 11, 2021. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 11, we have 2 liquor permits to consider. Let's first consider the Speedway 3670 during business at 6601 Monroe Street, Sylvania, Ohio. Chief, any comments about this particular liquor sales point? All right. I think we need to consider these separately. Probably have to have a motion not to request one on 6601 Monroe Street, and then a separate motion not to request a motion, hearing on 6700 Sylvania Avenue. Mr. Fry, take that on.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll make a motion to not request a public hearing for the Speedway LLC DBA Marathon 8594 at 6700 Sylvania Avenue, Sylvania, Ohio, for a liquor permit transfer.
Second.
Moved and seconded not to request a local hearing for the Speedway 3670 doing business at 6601 Monroe Street. All in favor of that indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now for 6700 Sylvania Avenue.
Mr. Mayor, just, I did 6700 first.
Okay.
Sorry, I reversed you. I apologize.
Well, we just passed a resolution the other way around. Let's back up and do that first vote again.
What we did was right.
Okay.
Yeah, so now now we just need to do
Do the
the
6601.
6601.
Right. I think
Right.
we're okay, right?
All
You
right.
read it properly.
Yeah, I think we're okay. So I'll make a motion to not request a public hearing for Speedway LLC DBA Speedway 3670 6601 Monroe Street, Sylvania, Ohio, for a liquor transfer permit.
Second.
Moved and seconded not to request a local hearing for Speedway at 6601 Monroe Street. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving to the second page of our council agenda. This is to set the 2022 meeting schedule and trick or treat schedule. The reason for this is that the community calendar is being developed, and we need to get these dates onto that calendar. We've done this for the past several years since I brought this idea for a community calendar to city council. appears that the schedule as proposed does eliminate the first council meeting in July and the first council meeting in August, as permitted by the charter. Other than that, it is business as usual, and that reflects what we've done this year and for several years. It's also noted that the trick-or-treat schedule would be for October 31st, which falls on a Monday. I don't think that's an issue. It only is a problem if it's a Friday and if there happens to be a football game in town. But because the high school football schedule has been moved up a couple of weeks, that's not an issue anymore either. Usually it's safer, though, for the kids not to be out on a Friday or Saturday night. But it's a Monday night this coming year. Any comments on either one of those from city council members? Here.
Sorry. I'm
6 to 7:30 is what we normally do in the city. We will note that on the calendar usual.
Mr. Mayor, we're looking for a motion to adopt the schedule for the meetings for 2022.
I think we can do this in one motion to set the council meetings and set trick or treat. In other words, a motion to set the 2022 schedule, city council meetings and trick or treat, just what the title is there. Just a motion.
Okay. Then I'll make a motion to set the 2022 city council meeting schedule as submitted in our council packets and set trick-or-treating on October 31st, 2022, on Monday, October 31st, 2022,
From 6 to 7:30 p.m.
from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes, and those schedules are set. Moving on to agenda item 12, committee reports. We have added agenda item 13A, the schedule of finance committee meeting. Mr. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Schroyer, as all of you know, is hard at work along with the other members of staff in preparing the budget for our review and consideration. And as is typically the case, he's requested that we set up a finance committee meeting or meetings, depending on how things go. And if I recall from email you sent me, Mr. Schroyer, you were looking for the second week in October. Is that correct? Is that timing still sufficient based on where things stand with administrative efforts? What, I'm sorry, Mr. Schroyer, I didn't catch that.
Later in the week.
Fair enough. So that, let me look at the calendar. So you're thinking the week of the 11th through the 15th, Mr. Schroyer?
Friday.
How about Friday the 15th? Obviously, Mrs. Westfall is not here. So if there's a conflict for her, I would reach back out to everyone. Any concerns from any members of council in regards to that timing? I was thinking about putting it in the morning. Well, typically we do it in the finance committee room, but given circumstances being what they are with COVID, I would request that we do it here so that we have the opportunity for social distancing in council chambers. 7:30 too early for anybody? Going once? Then I'll make a motion to set a finance committee meeting at 7:30 a.m. on Friday, October 15th, here in council chambers.
Second?
second.
Moved and seconded to set a finance committee meeting to discuss the budget on Friday, October 15th at 7:30 a.m. in these council chambers. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, and we'll have the clerk post that meeting. Any further committee reports or committee referrals or business to take care of at this time? Hearing none, on to added agenda item 15. Mr. Sanford requested to announce a chamber event. Also, the chamber is publishing that on their Facebook account. It's shown up a couple of times I've seen. If you've got more information, and if you look at that, you'll see that it's a $100 ticket if you want to bring your spouse along with you. So it's pretty good, but we will allow one ticket per council member. And that number of tickets is the same number that they're offering all of their sponsors for the lights. Okay. That brings us to the end of our council agenda for this evening. Are there any other items for discussion at this time? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Been moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, and this council stands adjourned until its next regularly scheduled meeting 2 weeks from tonight on Monday, October the 4th at 7:30 PM in these council chambers. Thank you all for attending.